Arthurian-inspired movies and series exist like sand by the sea.
I don't like sand.
Not listed here are reinterpretations about Merlin, animation, musicals and parodies.
Get over there!
I told him we already got one.
With up to 25% more peril.
No, it's too perilous. We are the knights who say...
Even if these are better than any original before or since, like Monty Python and the Holy Grail from 1975.
Stop the first time since the last time. God be praised.
For Excalibur, the reinterpretations The Fisher King and The Mighty see the same named rearviews. The cycle of Arthurian films began in 1949 with the 4-hour 15-part US TV series The Adventures of Sir Galahad. Galahad wants, like his father Sir Lancelot, to become a knight in King Arthur's Round Table. For this he is to guard Excalibur for one night as a final test, which however gets stolen by a mysterious person. Galahad is denied knighthood until the sword is back. His search is hindered by the evil Merlin and Morgan Le Fay, Arthur's half-sister and also a magician. Galahad is played here by George Reeves, 2 years before he wore the Superman suit and died mysteriously in 1959 at the young age of 45 in an alleged suicide. In 2006, excellently visualized in the unfortunately bombed but absolutely worth seeing neo-noir insider tip Hollywoodland. In 1953, the American-British adventure classic The Knights of the Round Table was published based on Thomas Mallory's original. The romanticized Arthurian legends portrayal is the second part of an unofficial knight trilogy, a collaboration of producer, director and lead. This one is about the beginnings of knighthood. While the commercially also very successful Ivanhoe from 1952 dealt with the climax, and The Adventures of Quentin Durward, which bombed in 1955, with the end of this medieval era. The elaborate, brilliantly crafted piece of entertainment cinema, it's not my cup of tea, but as a child I didn't mind it, is visually impressive compared to other movies at the time, I guess. 1954, The Black Knight is a former blacksmith, which goes to win the hand of a noble with self-made armor as Black Knight for King Arthur into battle. The only interesting thing about this flick is the fact that during shooting our hero, Shorty Alan Ladd, had to stand on a box when he was stationary. Many backshots were obviously done by his stunt double, much like today's so-called big stars who in real life, like Tom Cruise, can barely see over the tabletop. During walking scenes, the other actors were in specially dug drawers or ditches, also required to stand with their legs apart and their knees bent. Closer to the original story and a bit better, but still nothing I would watch again, is 1963's Lancelot in Geneva, aka Sword of Lancelot. His traditionally chaste romance, Geneva marries King Arthur, gets here a modern twist. embarrassed as she and Lancelot become intimate. At the same time, King Arthur struggles to defend his throne against another king. In 1974, Robert Bresson's French historical movie Lancelot du Lac appears, in my opinion, as the first really good variation on the subject. The adaptation dispenses all fantastic elements of the Arthurian legend, such as the magic sword. Merlin, Parzival and a Grail are only mentioned in the prologue. The story begins with the unsuccessful search for the Grail, and two camps are formed in which those gathered around Mordred want to overthrow the weak king. The faithful trust in Lancelot, who is struggling internally with a conflict of loyalties due to his forbidden secret love for Guinevere. This extremely ambitious movie uses a very unusual cinematic language, often close-ups and detail shots. Only in the final sequence, the long shot. Also, there are no battles or elaborate sets. Everything seems very realistic. It's missing a continuous soundtrack. There's music only during the opening credits and during a tournament. Sound and picture are mostly used independently of each other. You rarely see all that you hear or hear all that you see. Considered similar to Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon and Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal, a masterpiece of the author film set in the Middle Ages. In 1995, the first knight rides into town. Here, Prince Malagant, a former knight of the Round Table who left Camelot in a quarrel and is now waging war on the land, threatens the kingdom of the ruler Guinevere. To gain an ally, she accepts King Arthur's marriage proposal. She also meets Lancelot, who foils a kidnapping attempt, and in return is made by Arthur a knight of the Round Table. Of course, he falls in love with the queen, and as a result you get such a shallow version of the story that even Disney would be too embarrassed. Here is another attempt to tell a fantasy story without fantasy, and a love story without real emotions, in the style of a family-friendly morning matinee. Richard Gere is completely miscast as the first knight. The rest of the top-class ensemble is, to the irrelevant, ultra-shallow script, as defenseless as a knight without armor. How to do it much better but still far from good shows us 2001 A Knight's Tale, Germany known as Knight Out of Passion, although it has nothing to do with the Arthurian legend, or even Geoffrey Chaucer's 14th century Canterbury Tales, stories about pilgrims on their way to Thomas Becket's tomb in Canterbury, on which it is supposedly based. In 14th century England, Sir Hector's squire William Thatcher dreams of one day becoming a knight. When Hector dies during a jousting tournament, a fight on horseback with lance only the nobility is allowed to practice, William decides, I guess out of passion, to secretly take over his role despite his low origin, and from now on to make a living with competitions for himself and his team. This movie promises already in the trailers that it will rock you, and it really does, with a story so simple little kids can follow, an MTV video clip aesthetic that appeals to teenagers, and completely inappropriate rock music, which should probably bring adults into the Knights camp. It is funny, fast-paced and has an extremely high trash entertainment value, with a very good cast, especially Heath Ledger, having visibly fun with their characters. For people who are not Queen fans and may have expected a serious adaptation, it's more like a Knight's fail. In the same year, The Mists of Avalon, another thing no one has asked for, crawls in 2 parts over TV screens. It is based on the 1983 fantasy novel Without Imagination by Marion Zimmer Bradley. The bestseller is an interpretation of the Arthurian legend from the female perspective. Because of this, a strong feministic, esoteric discussion surrounded the novel. The movie starts with Morgane being driven in a boat through a misty lake, beginning to tell of her life. She lived with her mother Igraine and her aunt Morgause in her father's castle, who was rarely home because of the war against the Anglo-Saxons. As members of the old religion, they worship the Great Mother, but conceal this mostly because Christians treat them with contempt. Igraine, like Morgause, comes from the island of Avalon and has the ability to see into the future. She foresees the arrival of the druid Merlin and her older sister Vivian, the Lady of the Lake and Avalon's highest priestess. She tells Igraine that she will have a son, a great leader of the Britons. The thematizing of the woman's point of view is, in my view, to distract from the unimaginative, dreary narrative. The good cast is completely wasted here, as already the book, which was a boring waste of time back then, has absolutely nothing to offer. The esoteric elements and simple-minded direction then ensure that the story evaporates into insignificance. Of course, as a man, I am far too insensitive and sexist to allow myself to pass judgment on this supposedly oh so important wannabe feministic esoteric bullshit. I, like any sane person, only read this thing back then to impress, unsuccessfully of course, my former girlfriend. The same reason why 99.9% of trivial junk literature, obviously made by simple-minded for simple-minded, like Twilight or 50 Shades of whatsoever, is picked up by guys in the first place. 2004 annoyed us once more, a take without fantasy elements and also a knight looking so miserable that nobody even suspecting him to be King Arthur, so they had to write it in the title. It also dares to make promises due its unique realism. In the 5th century, Lancelot is drafted for 15 years of military service at the 120-kilometer Hadrian's Wall, to which the men of his people are obligated after their occupation by the Roman Empire. His commander is Roman Artorius Castus, or short, Arthur, who actually lived 250 years earlier, but who cares? After the service of Lancelot, Galahad, Gawain, Tristan, Bors and Dragonet with Arthur 7, a secret special order from the Pope leads the last remaining Sarmatian horsemen. So the Pope had great political or even military influence in the 5th century? In the midst of the British rebels, where our medieval special force also sometimes helps the oppressed. So a mix of the Magnificent Seven and Braveheart?
We'll do it all.
Among other things, they free the imprisoned Celt Genevieve, who at first is the only woman fighting with them, later joined by also colorful painted half-naked women. Isn't it supposed to be icy winter? According to the script, Lancelot falls in love with Genevieve. At least I think so, it's hard to tell. Her typical medieval tightly laced leather-fringed bikini probably contributes to this as well. And let's not forget the subsequently breast enlargement surgery on the US movie posters and DVD releases. But then I guess a few script pages are missing, since the Lancelot Genevieve storyline doesn't go anywhere. His death through Til Schweiger, our biggest German superstar, is also running around practicing his scowl. Maybe he saw the box office results. Was probably no help either. Genevieve lures Arthur to leader Merlin so he can take over command of the troops. In a slow motion flashback, we see after a raid, child Arthur pulling out his father's sword from something, possibly Excalibur, who knows, which Merlin comments on as if not anyone could have pulled it out. And the without fantasy element completely pointless scene would not be exclusively in there just for the trailer. After the victory and the unification of nations, there's a wedding between Genevieve and Arthur, the new leader of the stupid Brits. There's not enough made in the world that could make me find even one positive in this uninspired, with no thought thrown out thing. The $120 million action flop schlock made just 200 million back worldwide. There is the blood splatter free, much shorter theatrical version and the somewhat more coherent director's cut, in which some scenes are missing, a campfire conversation, and others, the sex scene between Arthur and Guinevere, are also arranged differently. Here we have the prime example of well-meant is not well-made. The interesting basic idea of tracing the roots of the Arthurian legend might have succeeded under a more talented director, who showed a bit of flair for the subject, but certainly not by the hack who later displayed his complete simplicity with cheap, expensive propaganda flicks like Olympus Has Fallen. So here we have a painfully boring plot, although I have to admit that I laughed in tears when Kira and her lightly dressed colorful Fury troop also ran roaring into the battlefield. A soundtrack that desperately tries to make the audience think it's an epic, droning in the most inappropriate places, and one-dimensional characters who, apart from the so-called action sequences where opponents are sometimes let out onto the ice to be comfortably shot down by arrows flying selectively far before they break into the selectively yielding ice when they are not wandering from A to B in a bleak landscape, look serious and often tell each other the thin plot that the movie was supposed to show us.
If I just lay here.
Even more far-fetched and also set in the 5th century and at 67 million costs to 25 million worldwide box office, also a flop, is 2007 The Last Legion. For TV director Doug Leffler, also the first and last trip to the big screen, loosely based on Valerio Massimo Manfredi's 2002 same-named novel. As the Roman Empire crumbles, young Caesar Romulus Augustus, who is probably supposed to be Uther Pendragon, flees with his wise teacher / Merlin, an important sword / Excalibur, and a few faithful, of necessity to Britain, where they suspect the 9th Legion at Hadrian's Wall. The harmless adventure has a far-fetched story, but is entertainingly staged and can, in contrast to the 2004 King Arthur cucumber, at least entertain. The title refers to the 9th Roman Legion, which is said to have mysteriously disappeared. This is, without the bogus Arthur connection, also the topic in Centurion from 2010. The fast-paced, R-rated gorefest is thrillingly staged and entertaining like hell. And in 2011's The Eagle. The 1977 British TV series The Eagle of the Ninth is also based on Sutcliffe's novel.
Carried away by the moonlight shadow, lost in a river that's sadder than mine. Far away on the other side, he was trapped in the middle of a desperate fight, and she couldn't find how to push through.
Did you see everything you needed to see?
I saw enough.
2017, Guy Ritchie's career killer King Arthur Legend of the Sword calls to the round table and no one answers the call. This thing was seriously supposed to be the start to a 6-project Knights of the Round Table movieverse. Wizard Mordred attacks Camelot with fireballs and giant war elephants, Lord of the Rings style. King Uther finishes off the attackers with the magical sword Excalibur. Afterwards, he himself and his family get finished off by his traitor brother. Little son Arthur can escape, grows up in a whorehouse, and at some point unwillingly pulls the sword Excalibur out of the stone, aka his father's back. However, the sword in the back of the Arthur legend remains stuck, just like the stone middle finger to the audience. By this puke-boring too-long music video pretending to be a movie, with terrible CGI, non-existent story even if some pretend there is one, meaningless monologues disguised as dialogues, and totally miscasts in front of and behind the camera. Only Jude Law's laughable over-the-top performance can at least earn a few trash points. The $175 million joke without a punchline didn't even make its costs back worldwide, and was quite rightly one of the biggest bombs ever.
I watch your vision for me, carried away by a moonlight shot. Star was light in a silvery night, far away on the other side. Will you come to talk to me this time? But she couldn't find how to push through.
You're born king!
In 1979 was Unidentified Flying Oddball in Germany 1 year later as King Arthur and His Astronaut, my personal invitation to the round table. The Disney children's movie is based on the Mark Twain classic A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court from 1889. Since it is completely logical that in America travels into the past never lead on the same continent, not to face American natives, but always end somewhere in Europe. In the book, the protagonist finds himself after a blow on the head at the court of King Arthur. The writers of this so-called screenplay quite obviously got that one too. It's the only movie I didn't watch as a child with my little brother, 8 at the time, I was 9, together in the cinema. He, supposedly clever, little smart ass, bought a ticket for When Time Ran Out in Germany as The Day the World Ended. Another movie disaster, I meant of course disaster movie from 1980 about a volcano eruption on an island in the middle of nowhere. The only thing that really ran out was the hope of seeing a good movie during this earthquake imitation wannabe. But that was still high art and Citizen Kane compared to my screening.
Carried away by a moonlight shot.
It's about an American astronaut who flees off into the British past, where else, and proves at the court of King Arthur that there's no topic where Disney doesn't come up with the most embarrassing, unwatchable version and still gets away with it.